Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Candace Hamilton. Go get them.
Hello, everyone. Well, it's been a year, an amazing year, from the conception, the idea, and then here I am tonight. So, it took a lot of sleepless nights, waking up in the middle of the night, and my heart would just be racing, and I would be thinking to myself, who do you think you are? And I would get kind of, that negative self-dialogue would get going, and I'd start thinking to myself, who would want to come to hear me and my stories? And then after an hour or two, I'd kind of come out of it, that negative self-dialogue that has been part of who I am all my life. I would start saying, no, start questioning it. And after a couple hours, I would start to breathe into it, and I kept saying, no, there's a purpose here. And I'm going to do this. Even if I'm scared, even if I have anxiety, I'm going to push myself, and I'm going to do this. So 2013 was the year that I had the big shift. It was a really big shift. It was the year that I found myself in a repeated cycle. I'm sure you've heard about the cycle of violence that women can be in. I had lived it all my adult life. You could take the person's face out of the picture and just replace it with another face. Flop. Next one, please. Change the person. Next one, please. And it would just repeat and repeat and repeat. And I was exhausted. When I was alone, I would get on my path and things would start looking good. I would just be starting to get into my groove. And then I'd kind of think to myself, no, I'm all right, I'm good now. So I'll invite somebody into my life. Every time something would happen, I would pick the wrong person. I didn't know how or why. I just would. It would repeat and repeat. So in 2013, I decided that I'd had enough. So I got a therapist, and I went to the therapist, and I sat down and I told my story about all the different things and all the different situations I'd been in, and how tired and exhausted I was. And I just felt like I couldn't get up anymore. So the therapist said to me, well, not a problem, we're going to go through this, and we're going to take a few weeks. I think it was about 6 to 8 weeks, half-an-hour appointments, and we were going to get through it. But he said, we have to go back into your childhood and work our way through and make sure there wasn't any catalyst over in that area, and then we'll deal with your adult decisions and your sabotaging and everything else you sound like you're doing. But we have to go back there. And it actually infuriated me when I heard that I was going to be wasting my time going back into my childhood, because, you see, I had a good, normal childhood. Absolutely normal. So, first half an hour started, he would ask me a question. And at the end of the half an hour, I would always end up with the same sentence. But that's normal, right? And I'd have this kind of blank stare coming back at me, and he'd go, no, that's not normal. So I'd go home with this knowledge, whatever that he said was that time, what the story was, and why it wasn't normal. And I would think to myself, I always thought it was normal, week after week after week. But that's normal, right? No. So 2 months later, I had discovered that I did not have a normal childhood. But because when you're a child, all you know is what you know, right? It is your norm. It is your normal. So now we look at my childhood and we dissect it. And I'd always known this part of my life. I recognized it, but I put it into this compartment because I'd already been told from a very young age it was normal. My tormentor was my brother. My brother started out at a very young age. I believe my first memory of a pinch was around 2 to 3 years old. And he would just pinch me. And he'd have that look. Pinch. And then he'd look to see if my mom and dad would be around. The pinch turned into a shove. Shove turned into a kick. Kick turned into a hit. And that was my life. I can remember always being nervous. Where is my brother? If I were in the hallway in the house, if my brother saw me coming, he'd make sure that he would come the other way, and he'd push, shove, kick, whatever it was for the flavor of the day. But every day I had my tormentor. And for me, that was my normal. So I became quite shy. Shy. I know, it sounds kind of strange to see me up here and know that I was a silent child. I do remember saying to my mom several times about my brother and his hitting me. And she said, brothers do that. So I thought, okay, that's normal. Brothers hit sisters. Now, of course, as an adult looking back, you can recognize why that philosophy doesn't work. But as a child, of course, you believe it. So that's how I lived my life. The few times I did complain or cry, I would be sent to my room. Candy, quit your crying, go to your room. I can even remember one time my mom saying to a friend that she was saying how I was very small, because I can remember looking up at my mom, who I adore and love, and she said, oh, that Candy, she's such a clumsy child. Always scraped knees, bruises on herself. She's always falling. She's very clumsy. And I kind of thought, on top of everything else, I'm a clumsy child. So this internal dialogue begins, and I don't know where it ends, because when I was in about grade 7, I can remember getting so angry with my brother. I was so tired of being hit. And I was down in the basement in the rec room, and I did like that Tasmanian devil thing, and I just reefed on him. I just was going, and I had had enough, and I was screaming and yelling, and I said, no more, and I hit him. And I said, no more. So that was the day the physical abuse stopped. But I didn't need that anymore, because I'd already had all this negative internal dialogue going for so long. I didn't need him to hit me anymore. I took over the abuse. The abuse was already working in my head. I don't know if you've ever have any negative dialogue ever go into your head, but you can understand sometimes how it just kind of almost takes a hold of you after a while, and it almost becomes your mantra. So after I had all this therapy, and I did decide and recognize that I didn't have a normal childhood, and that really, truly helped a lot. And I was able to really analyze and start working through the hard work that it took to get through that negative dialogue. I was driving home from work, and I had this memory come back at me. And it was so strong, I had to pull off, and I shut off the engine because I knew it was going to be dangerous. And I just sat there in this memory. And it came back so strong and profound, and it just drained me. It was the memory of a molestation, on top of everything else. Something I had tucked away, it just whammed me. I didn't remember it. I always said to people, I have blocks of memory that I have no recollection of, blocks of my life. And here this memory came up. Now, it was not my brother, thank goodness. But my brother brought the molester in. He knew what he was doing. Can you believe that? He called this person up. He knew my mom and dad were not home. He invited him in. He told me to be good and not to say anything. And if I did say anything, I'd be in trouble. And I don't remember exactly what he said to me, but I do remember that feeling of helplessness and silence. So, I had that memory too. When I had that memory come back, after I had kind of sat in it for a few weeks, I went to my mom and dad and I sat them at their kitchen table. And I said to them that now, my dad's 90 and my mom's 87 this year. So they're elderly. So it's not like I'm asking them to change, right? I love them. They're my parents. But what I needed to do was tell them and remind them that about the abuse. They do recognize that there was abuse from my brother. They don't deny that. But when I did tell them about the molestation, they kind of sat there with this blank look on their face, and they kind of looked at each other, and then they looked at me. And my mom said, well, that was in your past. You need to get over it. And I think the best thing for you to do, Candace, is to go and see your brother and make things right. Yeah. So, what do you do with that, right? This is your family. So what I decided to do from that day on, I still wanted my mom and dad in my life, but I decided I was going to have some boundaries. As much as I wanted them, I was going to be careful from that day on. I don't know how much I can trust them anymore with my emotional baggage of the childhood and me trying to move through it and heal from that. I think what I had hoped was not that I wanted them to change anything, because that was my history, but I think just an acknowledgement that maybe they didn't recognize the symptoms of who I was at the time, and just maybe a hug, tell them that they loved me, would have been good. But they didn't. And so I asked them, the only thing I wanted from them at that point was that the acknowledgement that I wasn't able to move forward with my brother. Even though they wanted me to make things right with my brother, I was not able to. So I just didn't want to hear about my brother anymore. I wanted to start living my life, and I wanted to move forward. So I believed in my negotiation with my parents that on my side of it, I was good to go. So I don't believe that they said that they would honor that, but I had that impression that they would. So I started doing the work. When I had the memory of the molestation, I know it's a heartbreaking moment, and I know that there's probably people in the audience right now that may have been molested or raped also. And I don't mean this to be flippant, but the memory of that molestation was one of the best days of my life. Because it finally took a piece of the puzzle. I just couldn't figure it out why I had this storm in my head all the time. So once I had that information, even as horrible as it was, I was then able to do something with it and recognize why I had the sabotaging personality that I had up until then, and I could actually start doing the work. So it was a good day, and it was a shift. So that brings us to a year from now. When I was at a women's conference called Power of the Purse, I don't know what's coming up. There we are. Cynthia O'Neill. I don't know if anybody here has been to a Power of the Purse. Yeah? They're pretty amazing. She's been doing it, I believe, 4 years. She's taken a sabbatical for a year. but she's been taking this. She started it in London. She's been here in Sarnia. If it comes back next year, I believe, if you have the opportunity, I strongly suggest. It's an amazing day. And so what happens at Power of the Purse is there's these keynote speakers that get up on stage, and you're in the audience and you listen to the keynotes. And while I was sitting there in the audience, I had this bright light happen. And I thought, wow, I can do that. I have stories. And so as I sat there kind of mulling this idea over, I thought to myself, yeah, I think I can do that. I've been in theater for years, sang for years. This was something that I could be familiar with. So that's what I did. After a month, it still was with me. I was still waking up in the middle of the night saying to myself, yep, I'm going to be a keynote speaker. And so I thought, okay, let's go. So I had a 4-year plan. 4-year plan. I thought in my third act of life, I'm 59 now. I figure by the time I'm really starting thinking about retirement, I'm going to be a keynote speaker. And I thought that was a pretty good plan. And then my girlfriend's son committed suicide just before Christmas. And then there were other suicides. And things changed. I thought, it's time now. I need to do it now. If there's one person that I can touch, if there's one person that I can inspire to be a mentor, or somebody that is not feeling good about themselves and they're thinking about suicide, maybe I can make a difference. So my 4-year plan turned into one. So I came to the Imperial Theatre, and I talked to Brian Austin Jr., and I told him about my dream, about creating the shift. And he was right on board. Wow, was he on board. He just loved the idea. By the way, hey, Daryl. One of my mentors, by the way, is in the audience. Brian Austin and I have a connection. See this little tiny Tim at the Petrolia Playhouse? Isn't that amazing? And we looked at each other and we went, oh my goodness. I sang to him about Santa Claus, believing in Santa Claus, how many years ago? So I knew another sign that was telling me, this was man that was supporting me, and he was saying, yes, we're going to do this. And it's not going to be a one-time deal. We're going to do it every year. And then we're going to build on it, and it's going to become a theme, and it's going to be creating the shift, and you're going to do stuff with this. And yeah, we're going to start in Sarnia, but we're going to take it across Canada. So, here we are.